Welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist Community of Charlotte. I'm Eve Stevens. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm one of the ministers of this congregation. Every day, we wake up and head out into the here and now. We see what's in front of us and respond to the task at hand. We vacuum, we eat, we travel to appointments, check the latest news, pay bills, wash dishes. This is not to say that we are always mindful and fully present in the moment. It's to say that we humans spend a fair amount of time in the here and now, seeing what's in front of us and living in the world as it is. But we know another way of seeing, too. Seeing beyond what's here and now. Seeing beyond what's reasonable or even feasible. This other type of seeing allows us to live inside stories in which impossible and amazing things happen. Imagination. This type of seeing allows us to move outside of the laws of physics, apply skills we've never learned, and enjoy what we've never tasted. It is imagination that gives us the power to create the world we long for. It is imagination that gives us the power to build what doesn't yet exist. Welcome, members and guests. I invite you to head over to our public Facebook page to greet one another under the comments of today's welcome post.
Welcome to our guests. Hi, I'm Joe Hoff. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a member of this congregation. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. I'm so glad you found your way to this service and our community. There are a variety of ways to get connected here. We offer religious education and spiritual development classes for all ages and opportunities to socialize and to support one another. If you want to learn more about us, I encourage you to reach out to our membership coordinator, Kelly Green. You can email Kelly at KELLY@UUCCHARLOTTE.org, or respond to her comment under today's welcome post on our public Facebook page. Again, welcome. We light this chalice flame, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with gratitude for the creative spark within each of us. May this time together kindle our imaginations as we long together for a more compassionate and just world. Our reading today is from an essay entitled Decolonizing the Imagination by young adult science fiction author Zeta Elliott. Elliott writes, I am an immigrant. I grew up in a former British colony dreaming of magical wardrobes and secret gardens. Books were indeed windows into other worlds. They were not, however, much of a mirror of my young Black female self. I learned early on that only white children had wonderful adventures in distant lands. Only white children were magically transported through time and space. Only white children found the buried key that unlocked their own private garden, Eden. As an author, it is important to me that African American youth know they need not look to a castle in England to find magic. There are wonders to discover and adventures to be had right here at home. If we do not create stories that expose the beauty and complexity of our varied realities, we will remain trapped by the fictions created by the dominant culture.
If we do not make space for stories that expose the beauty and complexity of our varied realities, we will remain trapped by the fictions the dominant culture creates. As Zetta Elliott shares early on from all the reading she did in her childhood, she learned that only white children had wonderful adventures in distant lands. Only white children were magically transported through time and space. Only white children found the buried key and unlocked their own private Eden. At bedtime in my household, my little ones choose from a stack of books, selecting the stories that will have the final word on their day and send them off into dreamland. We read the old classics, and new classics. We own so many books written by white authors featuring white characters, brave boys, pretty girls, a mommy, and a daddy. These characters enjoy a diverse range of experiences, doing things as mundane as making pancakes, silly as offering a mouse a cookie, or as fanciful as sailing to a far-off land to become king of the wild things. It took research and intention to find books that venture outside of the established narrative, typical characters, and approved landscapes. A book that features a kid with black skin, not about the color of his skin, but about his day at the beach with his dad. A story about a little kid who gets carried away by penguins while shopping for birthday hats ahead of her party, and her epic journey to finding her way back home to her dad's. A story about a little boy who dreams of being a mermaid and how his abuela one day makes his dreams come true, decking him out in beads and a long flowing skirt. Reading with my kids tucked away from the rest of the world at night. I am keenly aware of Zetta Elliott's words, aware of what stories are nourishing my kids' imaginations and which are not, aware of just how easy, how casual it is to not make space for stories that expose the beauty and complexity of our varied realities. I've been listening to Public Radio's Code Switch podcast, and I recently heard an episode about the beauty industry. A listener had written in with a question for the host to respond to. The listener asked, besides the natural hair movement, what other ways have women of color found to decolonize their beauty routine? Decolonize. In other words, how have women of color found ways of creating a look all their own, a look not filtered first through the eyes or the approval of white people? How have women of color managed to remove the specter of the white ideal of beauty when they look in the mirror? Just as a colonial power does in any land, white culture, cisgender culture, heteronormative, patriarchal culture has established its way of doing things and seeing things as superior, as the right way, the ideal, the standard against which to measure all other ways of doing and seeing. Just as a colonial power does in any land, dominant cultures set the rules and enforce them. We are increasingly aware of how intricately our external world, our industries and institutions are controlled by dominant cultures. But we sometimes forget that our internal world has been colonized too. That too often, even our imagination, this realm not of this world, even our imagination is governed by whiteness and patriarchy. In her book, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Angela Y. Davis writes, what we often assume belongs most intimately to ourselves and to our interior emotional life has in fact been produced elsewhere and has been recruited to do the work of racism and repression. Decolonizing our imaginations requires an intentional and consistent practice. The practice of making space, of honoring stories that expose the beauty and complexity of our varied realities. There are people who have a gift for pulling apart familiar stories steeped in dominant cultural norms and refashioning them as stories that celebrate a marginalized experience or perspective. Fan fiction. Fan fiction is literally spin-off fiction written by the fans of a book or a show or a movie who want to take a familiar story in another direction. Writers of fan fiction have the power to airlift beloved characters from the confines of an established narrative to place them in an entirely new and different universe in which entirely new and different things can happen. The original series of the show Star Trek featured a crew aboard the spaceship Enterprise. They were on a 5-year mission, in the words of the 1966 version, to boldly go where no man has gone before. 2 stars of that show have particularly captivated fans for generations. Captain James T. Kirk, a square-jawed, muscular picture of masculinity. He is brave and assertive, disregarding all potential consequences from authority as he takes daring risks. He's capable of both stoic strength and passionate displays of emotion. Kirk is romantically involved off and on with a number of women, but shows the most loyalty and steadfast affection for his ship. And Mr. Spock, a man of both Vulcan and human heritage. Spock is calm, even-handed, appearing unconcerned during even the most harrowing situations. As a Vulcan, he values logic to an extreme and is ever striving to keep his mind clear of feelings. But regardless of their differences in temperament or opinion, Spock is loyal to his captain, come what may. There is a prolific and intricate lineage of fan fiction that imagines Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock as lovers. The tension lingering between them as their eyes meet meaningfully across the ship's cabin. Kirk wishing Spock was more emotionally available. Spock wishing Kirk was more consistent and reasonable. Always just missing each other emotionally and intellectually, and each completely unable to get the other man off of his mind. Author Octavia Butler centered Black experience in the predominantly white, male science fiction genre. She created worlds and species and time travel adventures from scratch, but in her own way, she too dismantled and reassembled stories from the dominant culture. In her intriguing and at times disturbing short story, Bloodchild, the setting is at first glance a world the reader finds completely foreign, unfamiliar. In this story, humans and aliens share the same planet. In the world Butler creates, human males are able to carry developing bodies in their body. Men are coveted and protected by their alien overlords for their ability to carry new life. But these men struggle for agency over their own body in a culture in which pregnancy is not a choice for them, but an enforced obligation. They grapple with their fear of going through a painful procedure to bring new life into the world, a procedure they fear will forever change their bodies. Within a seemingly unfamiliar and disorienting setting, Butler plays with familiar complexities of pregnancy and childbirth, shining a spotlight on society's expectations and gendered demands. Writer and activist Walida Imarisha writes that Octavia Butler's flavor of science fiction belongs to a category all its own that she calls visionary fiction. Visionary fiction is science fiction that, as she says, has relevance toward building new, freer worlds, which distinguishes its from the mainstream strain of science fiction, which most often reinforces dominant narratives of power. Imarisha's collaborator, fellow writer, and activist Adrienne Marie Brown writes, I believe that all organizing is science fiction, that we are shaping the future we long for and have not yet experienced. She says, I believe that we are in an imagination battle, and almost everything about how we've been taught to orient ourselves is shaped by fearful imaginations. Imaginations that fear blackness, brownness, fatness, queerness, disability, difference. Brown concludes, our radical imagination is a tool for decolonization, for reclaiming our right to shape our lived reality. Another great science fiction writer, Ursula K. Le Guin, also writes about the power of the imagination. She says, the exercise of imagination is dangerous to those who profit from the way things are. Because imagination has the power to show that the way things are is not permanent, not universal, not necessary. Le Guin concludes, we will not be free if we do not imagine freedom. Imagination is a way of seeing things that gives us power to build and create the world that we long for, that doesn't yet exist. It takes intention and curiosity to feed our imagination from well springs outside of the dominant cultural narratives that surround us. It takes intention and curiosity to look beyond heterosexual love stories, tales of brave men and beautiful women. It takes intention and curiosity to look beyond narratives that erase people of color. When we feel powerless or frustrated, when we want to get out there and do something to counter oppression, whatever is happening with the pandemic, whatever is going on in our lives, we can dive into the work of decolonizing our imagination without ever leaving our home. As Walida Emarisha says, the decolonization of the imagination is the most dangerous and subversive form there is, for it is where all other forms of decolonization are born.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. Oh, it isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A fellowship of man. Imagine all the people sharing all of the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one. You may say I'm a dreamer, oh, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, so the world will live as one.
Our Board of Trustees recently sent out a special message to our members, inviting you to engage anew with our efforts towards spiritual, societal, and environmental transformation. In the coming weeks, board members will be engaging us in conversation about how we might connect more deeply with one another and with our shared vision. You may have noticed in our e-newsletter Currents, there is an opportunity right now to become a UUCC pen pal. We will match you with someone else in the congregation, hopefully someone you don't know already, provide you a few prompts, and invite you to exchange letters at least twice. Hope it's a good way to connect and get to know someone else a little better. We join with so many around the world mourning the death of Thich Nhat Hanh earlier this week. That devoted practitioner of Buddhism who made the wisdom of that faith more widely accessible. Thich Nhat Hanh, the courageous peace activist who spent so much of his life countering violence with tenacious compassion. We hold his communities with love. Here in our congregation, we are sending love to Barbara Busey and her family as they mourn the death of Barbara's mother. We're holding Denise Weldon Clark and Chris Clark and their family in our prayers as Denise's father recovers from surgery and faces additional health challenges. We hold in our hearts Tom Cole and Carol Hartley, Patrick and Sarah Cole, as Tom recovers from a recent hospitalization and faces his own additional health challenges. We're sending love to Neil Sigmund and Mary Ann Lawler as Neil continues long-term treatment for a serious illness. We hold in our prayers Tawana Wilson Allen, Manny Allen, Tamia and Derek, Tessa and Tegan and Talia, and all of their family as Tawana continues to face ongoing serious health challenges. Whatever you carry with you today, may you feel held by the love of this community.
During the pandemic, I have continued to reflect on the place of this congregation in my life. I attend services that nurture my spirit. I have met friends here. I have taken classes that have expanded my understanding of myself and others. As I offer my own gifts, time, energy, and financial support, I am grateful for all the ways this community sustains me.
Let's breathe more deeply now. Close your eyes. Work your way through your body. And wherever you notice tension as you breathe deeply, release a little bit of that tension more and more with each breath. Our meditation is slightly adapted from the Sufi poet Hafiz. The one whose mind is small builds cages for everyone they know, while the sage, who has to duck their head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. The one whose mind is small builds cages for everyone they know, while the sage, who has to duck their head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. Amen. Be well, all, and reach out when you need us.